I want to share with you this morning what the Jewish rabbis would call a midrash, an explanation of a single verse of Scripture. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. It reads thus. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Galilee said to Ahab, As the Lord the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. He came from nowhere, or at least as close to nowhere as you're ever going to find. I mean, after all, Tishbe was not an important place. It wasn't some place that everybody desired to go to. It wasn't like the family got up one day and said, this year we're going to Jerusalem. And if we're going to Jerusalem, we might as well go by Tishbe. There wasn't anything in the place that made it spectacular. There wasn't anything there that drew people to it. It didn't have marvelous natural wonders or something spectacular to come and see. It wasn't a strong military outpost. It didn't have a strategic place. It wasn't like kings and generals, as they looked at the map, said, if we're going to capture Israel, the key is to capture Tishbe. It just wasn't that important a place. There wasn't any reason to go there. There wasn't some spectacular king or prince or satrap that lived there. It wasn't the seat of government. It wasn't the place of a military outpost. It didn't have some economic stronghold. There were not marvelous things to go and see. It was just kind of a nowhere place. As a matter of fact, Tishbe was a town that was made up of nomads. And periodically the town moved. You can't even say that Tishbe was a place. You couldn't say on a map, that's where Tishbe is, because they literally would pick up and move it. Tishbe wasn't a place. It was kind of like a state of mind. And so when Elijah comes walking into the capital city of all of Israel, and he gathers with these people, and they engage him, and they say to him, where are you from? And he smiles and he says proudly, I'm from Tishbe. He gets one of two reactions. The first one, the polite one, was when people would look at him and go, oh, Tishbe, how interesting. The second was far more direct. Tishbe? You say you're from Tishbe? I never heard of Tishbe. You ever heard of Tishbe? Never heard of Tishbe. You mean Tishbe's a place? Can't be from around here. Never heard of the place. Can't be that important. Tishbe? Where's Tishbe? Poor Elijah. He came from nowhere, or at least as close to nowhere as you're ever going to find. And so when he told the crowd that his task, his mission, the reason that he was there is that he wanted to have an audience with the king, they laughed at him. They laughed at him. They said, do you have some kind of tribute that you're bringing to the king? Of course he had none. Did he have some military orders that he was bringing? Was he bringing some kind of communique from an important person? Absolutely not. And they said, you'll never get in front of the king. There's no way you'll ever have an audience with the king. You have to be somebody of importance or be carrying something of value. But Elijah was undaunted. I guess if you have a message from God and you're on mission for God, he will provide a way even to get in front of the king. And so, amazingly, how I have no idea, Elijah, this man from nowhere, ends up in front of the king of all Israel. And there he stands, having an audience with the most powerful person in all of the kingdom. And there he stands directly, looks the king right in the eye, and delivers to him the sermon that God has placed on his heart. Sermon. not one you probably will be taught how to do. A one-sentence sermon, not a common one. Not easy to teach. Didn't have any introduction, no stories, no 3 points, no Lowry loop. Just one sentence. I don't know which word he emphasized or if he emphasized any. I don't know what dynamics he told, how well he stood, and dramatically he presented it. It was just one sentence. He looked at the king and said to the king, "It shall not rain, neither shall there be any dew nor rain until I say so, thus saith the Lord." And that was it. I'm sure he delivered it well, but it was a brief, simple sermon. And then he did the most amazing thing of all. He turned and he left. Amazing. He turned and he left. You don't turn your back on the king. You don't dismiss yourself from the king's presence. You wait for the monarch to dismiss you. But Elijah was finished, apparently. He had delivered his sermon with great panache, I'm sure. But he turned and he left. So stunned were the guards, so stunned was the king, so stunned were the people in the hall that no one stopped him. They must have stood there with their mouths aghast as they watched this prophet, this one-sentence preacher, turn and walk out of the palace. He walked through the door, down the steps, and into the street. And he walks into the street and he has absolutely no idea what he is supposed to do next. He has no plan. It apparently never dawns on him that after delivering this message, and when the rain stops and when the dew ceases, he's about to be the most hunted man in all of Israel. And yet he walks out into the street and has absolutely no idea where he's supposed to go, what he's supposed to do next, what steps he's now supposed to take. Perhaps he was just going to go back to Tishbe. Because after all, Tishbe is about as close to nowhere as you're ever going to find.